Hello, and welcome to the Bad Sports Takes channel. If this is your first time watching, just to let you know, the way that my videos are set up, the way that I like for it to be set up, I love comments, I love debating with people respectably, but the number one rule of all things is to make sure, watch the entire video. Most of my videos are pretty short, so watch the video to get the full context before you end up commenting anything, as it's kind of annoying to comment with someone that didn't watch the whole video and it turns out that we were mostly in agreement the whole time. Watch the video, pay attention, and then comment to your heart's content. Thank you for stopping by in this video, and I hope you enjoy the following production. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to start talking about what the playoff could look like. This is going to be a couple of videos before this weekend's slate of games kick off. And the first question I'm going to be asking is there a way for Alabama to get into the playoffs? And when I say this, I mean both in the ultimate fantasy land and also in the real world. Now, the short answer is yes, it is technically possible for Alabama to get in. But we're talking about a scenario where they would jump Ohio State, a team with one less loss than them, more high-end wins than them. Alabama hasn't beaten a single team with more than 8 wins. Ohio State has a win in their resume against a 10-win squad and a handful of other okay teams as well, so there isn't that much of a difference there in terms of resume. Realistically, there were 5 games that Alabama could have lost that they almost lost on the last play of the game. Right? You have all these things. I don't see a world where Alabama, having not played a game with 2 losses and not even winning their own division, jumps over a 1-loss squad. If anything, Ohio State this year is much more like Alabama was in 2017 than any other squad. Remember that Alabama team in 2017, they'd lost the weekend before a championship week against Auburn, at Auburn, and it wasn't a pretty game, and Auburn had mostly handled Alabama. It wasn't a blowout on the same level as what we saw with Michigan and Ohio State, but it was still, Auburn still had handedly won that game in 2017. Anyway, though, I don't think that Alabama just jumps Michigan having done nothing. You know, that doesn't make any sense. So we have to keep in mind, any scenario that Alabama gets in, Ohio State almost certainly gets in. But let's talk about it. And the only scenario is where both TCU and USC not only lose, but they lose bad. I'm talking like 30 points bad. Because especially with TCU is a 12-win squad. And you're comparing a 12-win team that won their conference regular season wise, went undefeated in the regular season, and has a plethora of wins against good teams. There's a decent amount of decent teams in the Big 12. You're talking about a team that would be 12-1 that won their conference and technically won their division in the regular season, versus a 10-2 squad in Alabama that didn't even win their own division with 2 losses, and that doesn't have a win against a team with more than 8 wins. Those teams aren't comparable. They're just not comparable. And now, of course, now USC, if USC loses, they're out, and I don't think that's even questionable at that point, because USC and Ohio State are comparable, and that's the first domino that has to fall. It's just USC loses, and based off of the fact that the Pac-12 has this weird fetish with cannibalizing its playoff hopes, it makes only perfect sense for USC to lose this game, since the Pac-12 literally cannot get out of its own way. So that has to happen for sure, and there's a pretty good chance of that happening, especially against a Utah squad that over the years has proven to be pretty pesky against USC teams. So that has to happen first though, right? USC has to lose without a question, and there's a good chance of that happening. TCU, I think it's still pretty debatable that they can lose, especially if it's a reasonable loss of like between anywhere from like 1 to 10 points. I think TCU, especially in a scenario where USC loses as well, I think TCU would still be in, because they would still have more overall wins than Ohio State and Alabama. I think if TCU was an 11-1 squad, I think there's a different case to be made entirely, but since they went through the regular season undefeated and survived that, they survived the whole season, like, you have to reward going through the entire regular season undefeated. So even if they lose and even if USC wins in that same scenario, I think they would just switch space. They would just switch spots, honestly, right? If TCU loses by not much and USC wins, I think they would just switch spots in the playoff currently, and the current playoff rankings. But yeah, if they both lose, like, they get the doors just blown off of them, like, it's a humiliating loss, then I think there's reason to consider that they would move up. And to give Alabama credit, while they don't have many, they don't have many great wins, their 2 losses were by a combined 3-4 points total, and they were both road games against really good teams. Honestly, it's not inconceivable to see Alabama getting in if both USC and TCU get blown out, especially since at that point you're talking about an 11-2 USC squad, which is certainly comparable to a 10-2 Alabama team. And obviously Ohio State, reasonably you could say that they would be comparable to a TCU squad that's 12-1 but just got blown out. So that is reasonably it. Also, at the end of this video, just wanted to give a shout out to Tennessee, right? After the Hendon Hooker injury and the loss to South Carolina, that could have been a terribly dark day for this Tennessee program, because they lost their playoff hopes and they also lost out on potentially having a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in the same game. And I predicted that, that happening, plus Vanderbilt surprising a lot of teams and having a really strong finish to the season, I predicted that Tennessee was going to lose to Vanderbilt in Nashville, and they came out there with Joe Milton and company, and they blew Vanderbilt out the water 59-0, and got their first 10-win season since, I believe, 2007, which is before I ever even started watching college football. So I want to give a shout out and a congratulations to Tennessee for breaking through that 10-win barrier. Being a Georgia fan, I'm still used to 10-win seasons all the time. We fired Mark Richt, even though he had several 10-win seasons under his belt, and that was because we knew we could do better. But even from my perspective, I can clearly see that, it's great to see for the Tennessee fans, see them break through that 10-win season. And if Nebraska ever gets to that point, it's going to certainly be a great thing that happens. And secondly, congrats to Penn State as well for reaching 10 wins. Now, that's a bit more of a standard thing for them. They've had a lot of good seasons in the past 15 years. But even still, it's good for that program, and they're just a nice, consistently good program. And so it's good to see more teams out there that are able to reach certain milestones and either be consistent or reach milestones for the first time, in Tennessee's case at least. So that's all I have for this one, and look forward to some more playoff themed videos in the future.